Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, this is Thomas Hubert, digital editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. This week, Teagasc issued its economic forecast for 2016, and it is predicting a 5% rise in farm incomes after a difficult time this year. Our news journalist, Odile Evans, spoke with Teagasc economist Thia Hennessy.
Yeah, so I suppose that 5% increase is coming on a reduction this year, which was really driven by a fall in the milk price was the main factor. Even though beef prices increased this year, the fall in milk price reduced overall income. What we're expecting to see next year is a reversion of that, milk prices recovering a little bit and beef prices falling off, but still an overall increase in income.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose last year the dairy prices really dragged down the average. What was the average last year?
Yeah, so we had a quite interesting situation across the farm sector this year. So what we saw was dairy farm incomes fell by 30%, but incomes in every other farm sector were up. But still what we've seen in 2015 is that average farm income was down by 9%, so the average for this year being about €24,000 across all types of farms.
Mm-hmm. And what was interesting also with the gross margins, particularly I noticed in the grain, they're not changing very much. Would you agree?
That's true, yeah. So we've had very little change, I suppose, on the grain side over the last few years. We've had a bit of volatility in price, but that's been offset by the volatility in yields, and overall very little movement on tillage farm income over the last year or two, and something similar expected again for next year.
And obviously the weakening of the euro was a major player, throughout 2015. What do you expect to see happen there in 2016? Yeah,
so I suppose we have this event every year, and last year we were forecasting maybe a slightly worse outcome for the sector this year than has occurred, and that's really because the euro has continued to weaken beyond all expectations this year. What we're expecting next year is for that to continue. There's expectation of interest rate increases in the UK and the US before the end of next year, and that's likely to keep their currency strong relative to the euro, so the euro will remain weak into 2016. Now this has two impacts really for farmers. On the one hand, exports become more competitive in the UK, which is a very important market, so that's good for commodity prices. But on the other hand, inputs we import, like fertiliser, diesel, all of those are more expensive when we buy them with euros.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
In Northern Ireland as well, 2015 has seen a dip in farm incomes and an increase in the number of calls to the Rural Support Helpline. Its chief executive, Jude McCann, spoke with our Northern Ireland editor, David Wright.
Rural Support was set up in 2002 after the foot and mouth outbreak, at a time when there was a lot of pressure on farmers and farming families. So 13 years later, Rural Support is still providing help. We have our helpline, which is open from 8 in the morning till 11 at night, every day of the year. And we have also got a team of staff and volunteers who will go out and provide one-to-one support to people who find themselves in difficulties. That could be anything from financial pressures, it could be more business, farm technical issues, relationship issues. So we can provide support on a wide range of issues.
One of the things that was mentioned today was quite often somebody comes to you with an issue, but actually whenever you dig deep, it turns into something different.
Yeah. I suppose sometimes it's difficult to pick up the phone in the first place to talk to a stranger, and the issue that does come across on the telephone isn't always the main reason why people are contacting you. It's only when our staff are out providing support and building up trust with people that sometimes people start to open up and talk about the real difficulties that they're experiencing. It's easy to maybe talk about the price of milk or the lamb prices, but it's a lot more difficult to talk about things like depression, mental health issues, marriage, breakups, things like that. But those are the realities of what we're dealing with.
And a lot of what you do is actually providing a signposting service or referring people on to other services that could deal with specific issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it's a bit of a minefield out there, sometimes knowing where to go to get help on specific things. So a key part of what we do is refer people into the most appropriate organisations and to the right people. That could be anything from counselling service support, or it could be something more around legal issues that we will be able to signpost and direct people to the best possible support that's out there.
I know a number of speakers today have talked about farming maybe being in the most difficult place it's been maybe in a generation. We saw a lot of the sectors under pressure currently. Are you seeing that coming through in the level of calls that you get from specific sectors, or in terms of volume as well?
Our calls, we were looking at our calls over the last 3 months and comparing them to the calls last year, and we're seeing a 25% increase. Now that is alarming because we have had one of the best autumns I can ever remember, and the volume of calls generally always relates to how the weather's doing. So when the weather's good, generally our calls are going down, but the fact that they're still increasing does give us concern for what the winter might lie ahead. And as the dark evenings come in, that's when people start to maybe dwell on some of the issues, or maybe start to tackle some of the issues that otherwise they were too busy doing physical manual work on the farm when the weather is good, but now they're having to deal with the paperwork and the bureaucracy and the financial issues that they're facing.
And your advice to somebody who's feeling under pressure or feeling a bit, feeling things are getting on top of them, your advice to those people?
Advice would be to remember that you're not alone. It's not just you who's experiencing these challenges. Almost every sector in agriculture is under pressure at the moment, so you're not alone. There's help out there. Pick up the phone, contact Rural Support. Our number is 0845 606 7607. There's no harm in talking to us. We're there to listen, we're there to guide, and we will do our very best to help people who contact us. If it's not contacting Rural Support, speak to a family member or go to your GP if there's health issues there. We need to start talking about these issues rather than thinking that they'll just go away on their own.
Just a final question. You're obviously a charity. You provide free advice. First up, how's your funding ways? Are you secure? Are you still looking for others to help? Going forward.
Yeah, we are a small independent charity, and all the support that we give is absolutely free and it's completely confidential. Funding is a huge challenge, and we are all the time having to source funds from various sources. We do get some public donations. We have connected in with some companies who are keen to work with us, government departments, but it's a huge challenge. So we would make an appeal if anyone wants to support the work that we do, please get in contact with us.
Jude, thank you for your time, and I wish you all the very best going forward.
Thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Meanwhile, the Minister for Agriculture was touring Nigeria and Ghana to promote Irish exports in West Africa. Our market specialist, Phelim O'Neill, was travelling with Simon Coveney, and he asked him about progress in opening new markets and in establishing beef producer organisations back home.
Well, first of all, I think it's about recognising that Nigeria is a massive market for Irish food and for Irish food businesses. This is a population. This country has a population of 185 million people. That's half the population of the US, and by 2050, the population here will be about 400 million people. So it's the largest economy in Africa by far, the largest population in Africa by far, the country that imports the most food in Africa by far. And there's a huge growing middle class. With every year that passes, there's an extra 5 million people living in Nigeria. That's the population of Ireland that needs to be fed.
So there's opportunity.
So huge opportunity. We're currently, just in case anybody thinks that we don't have a big business here already, we're currently exporting 195 million euros worth of food and drink to Nigeria every year. And if you add what Guinness do here, in terms of what they import from Ireland, that's another 100 million as well. So this is a big trade partner for Ireland, but I think we can do an awful lot more. For example, we don't have any meat being exported to Nigeria at the moment. That's something I'm looking to work on. Obviously, this could be a very exciting beef market for us, as well as other meats. So, there's work to do here. One of my roles as a minister is to constantly open doors for Irish food companies to make sure that Irish farmers are selling into the markets that are paying the most. And certainly Nigeria is one of those.
Speaking of markets, and this will be the last one of the year, but earlier in the year you had missions to the United States. China's been high on your agenda. Yeah. How are those markets coming on? Are they where you would have expected them to be at this stage?
Yeah, well, first of all, on the US, there's been some coverage over the summer that the US wasn't fulfilling the potential that we'd promised and so on. I think that would be unfair.
Most manufacturing beef is the big prize there, and that's where the real money is to be made.
Yeah, but even without finalising manufactured beef, which will be finalised very shortly, I understand.
Okay.
We've still sold about 15 million euros worth of beef into the US. We've only got in since midsummer. It takes time to build up a market of that scale. But I think the US will feature as a major market for us, but obviously the industry will choose the markets that are paying the most for beef. So the key issue here is to have as many markets as possible, whether that's China, whether it's Japan, whether it's the US, obviously whether it's European countries, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Nigeria, so that our companies can sell into the markets that are paying the most in any given year, to make sure that Irish farmers get the best returns they can get in any given year. That's the whole idea of having new markets. But
when just to come across, and I do accept and welcome the fact that we'll get the manufacturing in there early in the new year, hopefully. Turning to China, you had, at the start of the year in February, I think, whenever the BSE ban was announced there, we had an expectation that perhaps Ireland would be supplying beef there by the end of the year. That's not going to be the case. It's going to be well into 2016 at best. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say at best. I mean, I'd be very confident that we'll be selling beef into China next year. It's a question of whether we can get it in the first quarter, which I think we have a reasonably good chance of doing. There are two things that need to happen before we're physically exporting to China. We've got the big decision made, which is the government have made their decision that they want to do business with Ireland on beef, and they've removed the barrier to that that's been there for many, many years since BSE. What's required now is the technical side. So an organisation called AQSIQ, who are like the quarantine organisation in China, they are to do one final visit to look at Irish factories, and then an organisation called CNCA, which are the organisation, food safety organisation in China that will approve individual plants in Ireland. But both of those have indicated that they want to come to Ireland, and we're obviously pushing to try and get those inspections before the end of the year, if possible. But if not before the end of the year, early in the new year.
So it's not if, it's when.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they wouldn't have sent a Prime Minister over to Ireland with his main focus in most of his speeches being Irish beef and its quality, if they weren't serious about facilitating not only a trade per se, but I think significant trade.
I think that'll be very welcome news to Irish farmers, and we can expect that next year. Finally, and I'm conscious that your mind will be very much focused on trade and on export matters this week, but back at home, issues are still around between farmers and meat processors in terms of the meat industry, and there's a round table coming up now, I think shortly in a couple of weeks' time.
December,
it seems as if both parties are on parallel tracks. What can you do to bring them together, to knock heads together there? Because there definitely seems to be more disagreement than agreement at the moment between our farmers and our meat processors.
But I mean, there's always tension between farmers who are looking to get the best price they can for their cattle and processors who are obviously looking to get the best deal they can all the time. So, like that's a fractious relationship. It's been that way for decades. One of the things we're trying to change in that is to put up a new structure of producer organisations for beef farmers that would represent large numbers of beef farmers and negotiate collectively on their behalf, so that instead of farmers simply being price takers when they come to the factory, they would actually have a professional negotiator as part of a producer organisation that are farmer owned, to actually negotiate everything from price to age to breed to condition to confirmation and all the rest of it.
How close are we to that coming into being?
Well, I mean, we'll be bringing forward proposals to the Beef Forum on the setting up of formal producer organisations, because don't forget, farming organisations at the moment are not legally allowed to negotiate on price. The Competition Authority will intervene if that happens, and so within the Common Agricultural Policy there is a new legal mechanism to set up producer organisations to increase the power of primary producers of food, i.e. farmers, in negotiating with processors and retailers. And I want to get that new structure up and running and working for the beef sector in Ireland. I think it would transform the relationship between farmers and factories, make it a much more professional-based one in terms of negotiation, as opposed to the kind of megaphone diplomacy or megaphone negotiation, I should say, as opposed to diplomacy. There's not too much diplomacy in that relationship. At the moment, if farmers are unhappy with the price or the treatment they're getting from factories, really the only option open to them is to protest. And we need to change that relationship. And that's what the forum's trying to do, is to make strategic structural change in the interests of farmers, in the interest of the industry as a whole, including processors, so we actually get a fairer price for farmers. Really this is about making sure that the market is delivering for farmers as well as factories all the time.
But as an observer, it feels like it's working or moving very, very slowly.
Quite the opposite. I mean, we've only had the Beef Forum up and running for less than 2 years, for a year and a half, and we've done a whole load of things. There's only been about 5 forum meetings. In each one, we've made quite significant progress each time. I mean, don't forget, the Irish beef industry has never had a producer organisation. The Irish beef industry never sat down with factories in a strategic way, like is happening at the moment.
Finally, then, do you feel, again, early in 2016, we will see a whole new marketing structure for Irish farmers, for Irish cattle, in their supply relationship with the factories?
I think, I'm not sure it'll be a marketing structure. What it'll be is a new relationship between farmers and factories that will empower farmers by creating economies of scale. Because farmers, if they choose to, by the way, this will be a voluntary thing for farmers if they want. If they choose to be part of a producer organisation which is farmer-owned and farmer-controlled, they'll be able to do that and have a professional negotiator negotiating on their behalf every week for farmers. And also from a factory point of view, providing information to farmers as to what the market is looking for to maximise the price that they can give for cattle. So, but by the way, that's just one of a number of things that the Beef Forum is involved in at the moment. But I think it's probably the most exciting.
Okay.
Can I just say one final thing? I mean, I do think it's worth noting that since we set up the Beef Forum last year, the beef sector this year has been a lot stronger than last year. I mean, prices have been between 5 and 7% higher on average than last year. We've had
currency has a lot to do with that, of course.
Yeah, no, but I mean, look, currencies fluctuate up and down all the time, and so we need to be in a position to take advantage of currency developments as they happen. If the currency changes, well, then we might be looking at another market. It might be China, it might be the US, might be other parts of Europe. I mean, that's how it works. But the important thing is that we're in a position to take advantage of the kind of opportunities that are there with currency change, and our beef industry is actually geared up to do that, and we've done that reasonably well this year.
Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
I'm in Paris this week following the climate conference here, where 197 countries are trying to agree on the way forward to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Environmental NGOs are here too, including Friends of the Earth. I talked to Oisín Coghlan, the director of their Irish branch, about his expectations for the talks and for Irish agriculture's contribution to the fight against climate change.
We expect there will be a deal here, but it'll be too weak in and of itself to generate enough action to contain climate change to safe levels. So really what we're focusing on are the things we have to do at home in Ireland and in every other country to actually contain climate change. So there's good things like promoting solar energy, promoting anaerobic digestion, and there's things we need to stop, like fracking, like burning peat, and indeed burning coal. That are the actual concrete things we need to do. And obviously we also then need to look at the emissions, the pollution from every sector in Ireland as well, in order that we do our fair share.
So you're asking for Ireland to do its fair share, regardless of the targets that will be agreed in Paris, which you expect won't really be enough. What do you call a fair share, and what especially is a fair share for agriculture in Ireland? Well,
just to be clear, in Paris, actually, there'll be no target decided for Ireland. At most, there'll be a target decided for the European Union. And it looks like the European Union is doing quite well and could do more because they've been underplaying how much they've achieved. But so the Irish target will be decided in the context of the European Union negotiations next year. And so no one's asking Ireland to do more than its fair share. But we are saying that Ireland needs to do its fair share. And our objection is to the way Ireland's going about its discussions, which is to say, we're a special case. We shouldn't have to act because we depend on agriculture. And the problem with that is that everybody has some special industry, some special case they need to make. And if everybody goes about the negotiations like that, we won't get enough action overall. We won't get a good enough deal. And in fact, I also think it's ineffective as a way of negotiating. I think we're going to get pushback from the European Commission and from the other member states because of the way we're coming across as special pleading. That's the way it sounded. The Taoiseach here yesterday to the Irish media sounded like special pleading. What we need to be doing is to be seen to be doing as much as we can in every sector to reduce emissions and to be as efficient as possible. And in that case, we can make the case that we're trying our best and now you need to take some consideration of the particular position of agriculture. And we don't actually object to some of the proposed solutions from the Irish government and from the farming lobby about what that might look like, whether it's a European scheme that allows Irish farming compete with other farm produce across Europe on the basis of our carbon footprint, if that's actually being measured. That would be fine, in principle. We have to see the detail. Or a scheme that says, as long as you offset the pollution from agriculture by other things you do on the land, whether it's forestry, whether it's restoring the bogs, that we'll count those two against each other. Neutrality, as it's called. If we balance our pollution with restoration elsewhere, that also is fine. Those things could work, but that's not how we're going about it. We're more or less saying, please, no, don't make our targets too tough. We can't do it. And that just won't wash. It's both inappropriate and ineffective. Every country has to be seen to do everything it can to do its fair share.
There might be a view that environmentalists basically hope for a reduction in food output from Ireland because we're so livestock based, and that would be the only way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Are you saying there would be ways that would be satisfactory from your point of view to keep increasing production but offsetting it or making it better in some ways?
Well, there's two things. One is whether we're talking about reducing or whether we're talking about endless increase. I mean, the problem at the moment is the Irish government is taking a position as we will do nothing that will limit the ever-increasing production of Irish agriculture. And that's not a sustainable position politically or environmentally. Because, let's be clear, we're not producing basic foodstuffs that the world needs to feed itself. We are producing, in the Minister Coveney's own words, premium products for premium markets. And indeed, beyond that, we're producing 20%, I think it is now, of the world's baby milk powder. And it's not a morally justifiable position to say we intend to increase production for profit, principally to convince the next million Chinese mothers to stop breastfeeding and start using infant formula. That is not justifiable in the 21st century on any grounds, and specifically on grounds of climate change. And indeed, we probably can't see everyone in the world eat as much beef and dairy as Ireland does at the moment.
You've heard forestry mentioned there, and European forests were discussed at a talk on the side of the conference on Tuesday. There, I met Geert Jan Nabuurs, a Dutch-based academic who's just published a study on how the EU could do more in harnessing trees to combat climate change.
Everyone should have access to mobility, but it has to be non-carbon based, non-greenhouse gas based within the next 35 years, which is a time span that most of us can comprehend. It's the length of our mortgages. Within that time, we have to have reduced our global emissions by at least half and our emissions in Ireland by at least 80%. And every sector will have to play its part.
Now, that's the challenge. But are there also opportunities, in your view, especially for rural Ireland, for farmers, to contribute to this in a more positive way?
Yes, and I think there are really good things happening in rural Ireland. Like the footprinting that is going on, the supply chains and the farmers in those supply chains for Diageo and for Glanbia are really, coming up with some really innovative and detailed work on their footprints. That needs to be rolled out across the sector, and that requires, obviously, active participation by farmers, but actually it also requires more support. So we've been an active proponent of Teagasc having more farm extension workers and employees of Teagasc who can develop the relationships over time. And as I said before, I mean, there are real opportunities in things like solar energy and in anaerobic digestion, and probably also in biomass.
Oisín, thank you very much.
Cheers.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
But back to Irish farms and to the jobs of the season. An important one is drying off cows, and James Mimna, one of the contributors to our farmer rights column, told me how he's trying to move away from the blanket use of antibiotics.
My farm is a mixed dairy and suckler farm, so we've autumn calving suckler cows, and they're currently calving down at the moment. We have a Charlie and Simmental bull for them, and we have about 30 suckler cows, about 30 dairy cows as well. AI most of the dairy cows, and they're spring calving herd. It's a fragmented farm. The out farm is actually 17 miles away from the home block, so it makes it a little bit difficult in terms of farming. So dry stock will be kept on the out farm, and the sucklers and dairy cows obviously are kept around the home block, and on rented ground as well. My part of the country, North Longford, is quite fragmented. You do have a lot of fragmentation of land and that, and with road networks and stuff, that it does create some difficulties in terms of silage harvesting, with moving cattle and things like that. But yeah, if I could, wave the magic wand and put all the land together, I'd definitely up the dairy numbers. Even in this volatile milk price scenario, I would up the dairy cow numbers and increase my milk output output as much as it possibly could, because I think, long term it's probably going to be the most profitable for my setup.
Who else works in the farm apart from yourself?
My father and my brother. So I have off-farm employment. My brother has some off-farm employment as well, but my father is full-time employed on the farm at home.
Now, we're in the autumn. You said you're autumn calving on the suckler herd. How's that going at the moment? Busy times, I'd say.
Yeah, it's very busy times at the moment. Yeah, only I think two days ago, I suppose we had 3 cows calved on the one day. Calved one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And I thought that was it. Went over to check on the cow that I calved in the afternoon to find one of the heifers had calved down as well. So you always get things like that happening. But it's thankfully all is going well. We've lost one calf, all right. We had a section as well, and unfortunately lost a cow after the section, maybe 2 weeks after. So you're going to run into things like that. But overall, calving is going well. They're healthy enough in that, and they're hopefully going to thrive on. And if we get a reasonable spring when they hit grass,
Now you're also drying off on the dairy side. How's that going? Any changes in the way you do this?
In the dairy side of things, we're drying off at the moment. I suppose they're being dried off, correlating with their calving date. So at the moment, I have about 40 to 50% of the herd dried, and they're going to be continually being monitored and dried at that. So we're looking about. I suppose not using antibiotics for some of the cows that we know doesn't have or didn't have a mastitis problem at all in the last year, and have generally come in the milk recording at quite low somatic cell count. So I think that's important, for farmers to look at that. And if you don't have some of these problem cows, in essence, that don't require antibiotics, maybe not to use them, just use a teat sealer. So that's what kind of I'm looking at this year about doing. Just with the talk about antibiotic resistance, it is important that farmers as well look at that and kind of take a more holistic approach, I suppose, in terms of looking at antibiotic usage on farm.
Is that one of the things you would write about? How do you choose the topics you write about as a farmer writer on farmersjournal.ie?
Yeah, I suppose what I would choose would be topical issues. So when the USA market opened up for Irish beef, I wrote a piece on that. Milk quota abolition, I would write another piece on that, and kind of feeding into my own situation on farm, where we were over quota this year, obviously, or at the start of the year, how it affects us at home in terms of the reduced milk price for the super levy fine. I suppose with other things like international situations, like what's happening in New Zealand, or drought in America, or as I mentioned before, I suppose the opening up for Irish beef following BSE. That's what I kind of draw on, and kind of what's happening at home. And if we buy new things like weighing scales or something like that, kind of maybe talk about that. So anything out of the ordinary that happens at home would be kind of a thing that I would write about.
Yes, I remember the piece about the weighing scales. Why is weighing so important for you? What's your experience with it at this stage? Yeah,
I suppose we bought it only recently, and it is quite important that farmers do weigh their animals in terms of having the correct dosage for medicine for the animals, so that you're not giving them too high a dose or too low a dose either. Giving them too high a dose obviously going to impact on the withdrawal from the medicine if you kill the animal in the meat plant, or too low could create resistance to the medicine itself. Weighing them as well before they're being sold in the mart, you can get a good handle on what you're expecting to get for that animal in the mart, or if you sell it to the factory, what you're going to get in the factory. Then you don't have to be panicking when you're in the auctioneer's area in the mart and you're wondering what you need to take. So you can go to the mart, I want this base price. And if you're not going to get it, well, you can bring the animal back home again, So I think it's quite important that farmers do get a handle on that. And in terms of weighing animals for in terms of performance as well, we're killing bulls. You want to be looking at the performance, your average daily gain, to know what you're doing right, and your daily gain from calf to weanling to store to finished animal is very important to get a handle on that. And by increasing that daily gain, by doing simple things like grass, meal feeding at the correct time, and maximising that output.
Okay, James, thank you very much. There will be a lot more of those aspects you'll be discussing on farmersjournal.ie in the Farmer Rights column. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Finally, with just 3 weeks of shopping to go before Christmas, Irish country living journalist Oisín Coghlan tells Mary Phelan all about the best Christmas markets to be found around the country.
Galway is one, which is one of the biggest in Ireland. So it attracted thousands of visitors last year, and it's a city-wide event this year. It's going from Eyre Square to Spanish Arch. So there's going to be plenty of food and plenty of stocking fillers there. I looked at a Victorian market in Limerick, which is a bit of a Christmas market with a twist. So that'll be taking place in the Old Heritage Church in Bruff, and everyone there selling will be dressed in traditional Victorian fare, which will be interesting anyway. And and it'll be lit in lanterns, so it'll be very atmospheric. And then with a lot of country people coming up to Dublin for Christmas for the shopping, I looked at a few markets up in the capital. There's a lovely one taking place on the South Circular Road. It's the Christmas flea market. So you should get like lots of antiques and things that are a little bit different there. And then also there's the, I believe, Christmas market, which actually was in St. Stephen's Green last year, but has moved to George's Dock, which is on the Red Line, so it should be quite easy for anyone getting the train up to Dublin this Christmas. They can just hop on to Lewis and go up to the Christmas market. And then I looked at a few then around the country. So there's one in Tralee, there's one in Wexford, Clare, and then there's the Milk Market in Limerick City, which is very popular as well. There's Glow in Cork, and then I also looked at the Mullingar Christmas Market. But there's plenty going on around the country. Like nearly every town or city has some kind of variation on a Christmas market. They're very in vogue anyway the last few years.
And is there any particular Christmas market in a particular town that stands out to you that you think might be particularly worth a visit?
I think the Victorian market looks really interesting. I like the look of it. The costumes alone, it should be quite something a bit different anyway. And it's actually it has historical links anyway with the town. So Queen Victoria actually visited Bruff during her time in Ireland on the way to visit Lord Dunraven in Adare. So there's historical ties there, and anyone who goes to the market will receive a scroll detailing her links to Bruff. So,
okay, that is interesting. What can you find at these markets? I mean, can you pick up decent, presents? Is the stuff being sold of high quality? Yeah,
I was down in Winterville and Waterford this weekend, and there are so many different things from food. Even if you're just going around just for a stroll, even if you weren't in the market to buy lots of presents, if you're a foodie and you wanted to pick up a few different things. So yeah, I think there's a lot there, a lot of artisan goods, a lot of things by local producers, which is something that a lot of markets would be highlighting, that they do sell gifts and crafts made by local people. So I think if you just even want to support local, I think a Christmas market is a good place to start your Christmas shopping.
And would you recommend people should be going to their local Christmas markets instead of travelling abroad, maybe to places like Germany, which are quite well known for their markets?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will go to Germany and places in Europe for Christmas markets, but I think you can get just as good in Ireland. The one in Galway certainly is very popular, and Cork as well, and Dublin, and you can really soak up the Christmassy atmosphere. And if you're going to Christmas markets, why not stay at home and save a bit of money? And I think support Irish markets if you can.
Thanks, Aisling, very much for that. And there's more details about Christmas markets all over the country in this week's Country Living.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.